The podcast of Tibetan Kung Fu, Episode 83. This is the podcast dedicated to our Kung Fu family. Those folks that practice Kung Fu to be a better person first and a better martial artist second. I'm your host, Sifu T.W. Smith, and if this is your first time here with us today, welcome. I hope you enjoy the program. Let's start by saying we had some great turnouts this past week, both at the Long Staff Workshop, which everybody was breaking a sweat and working outside pretty good with, and then also Miss Kat's Armor Self-Defense Meetup also went really well this past week. If you want to see what else is coming up, go to TibetanKungFu.net/calendar. In just a couple of days, I'm going to be on my first flight in almost 14 years, heading out to Tacoma, Washington. I'm looking forward to the Tai Chi and Qigong workshop we're going to be doing out there. If you want to come to that or learn more about it, go to TibetanKungFu.net/Tacoma, Tacoma. Before we get into the main topic for today, I want to take a moment and discuss energy drinks, specifically like Monster, Red Bull, and Rockstars, that have become very prominent, and they use very similar tactics as far as their marketing goes. I saw a recent article, and it says that over the past 20 years, the U.S. soda consumption has declined quite a bit. Full-calorie soda sales has dropped 25% during that period. However, beverages that are labeled energy drinks has been going up and thriving. The beverages are consumed regularly by 31% of the kids between the ages of 12 and 17. I've got a 12-year-old, so I'm really aware of this right now. And 34% of folks who are 18 to 24 also use it regularly. U.S. sales for energy drinks now total more than $12.5 billion. The market research firm called Package Facts predicts that this will grow by another $9 billion by 2017. In the November issue of Health Psychology, it suggests that there is a psychological and physical cost to the pills that the energy drink companies are making. It said, quote, "The more a man bought into masculine ideals, the more he believed that energy drinks made him manly, and the more he drank them, the more his sleep was disrupted." End quote. You'd also want to know that the FDA does not require that quantities of caffeine be listed on the labels. The results of a recent study were simple. In college-aged men, the drinks can cause anxiety, dehydration, insomnia, and cardiovascular problems. Another study, released earlier in the month by the American Heart Association, found that consuming just one 16-ounce drink elevates blood pressure and stress hormone responses in young, healthy adults. The reason I put this into our martial arts podcast? Well, one, to help offset any false sense of manliness. You don't need the drink to be manly. And also to know how they're selling their drinks. A company like Monster has become heavily vested in the MMA and UFC. In fact, if you go to monsterenergy.com, you will find an MMA page there, and it has a list of all of their featured athletes. And the recent UFC ring has the big Monster logo right in the middle. Red Bull has their list of athletes. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it can be dangerous. And caffeineinformer.com has 14 side effect dangers of energy drinks. The first is cardiac arrest. One study showed that between 2009 and 2011, there were 4,854 calls to poison control centers regarding energy drinks. 51% of those calls were involving children. Number 2, headaches and migraines. Number 3, increased anxiety was also a side effect danger. This may sound silly to say, but if you have a tendency to be anxious or worrisome, you probably just want to avoid those things altogether. Insomnia. Number 5, type 2 diabetes is also a dangerous side effect of these drinks because of the high levels of sugar in them. Number 6, drug interactions. And this can be a total ambush. We used to see it all the time in the clinics, that a patient didn't know that this medication, whether it was a blood pressure medication, perhaps a beta blocker or something, didn't mix properly with this and that, and all of a sudden they had a problem. Drug interactions are often overlooked as being a danger, but they can be awfully impactful on your health. Number 7, addiction. Folks have been shown to be unable to function without their extra Monster juice. And for others, it gets so bad it puts them in a financial stressful situation. Now, I'm not going to go through all 14. Those 7 are more than enough for me to give me the kind of information I need to make a decision about avoiding them. 2 essential developments and 1 poison to all martial arts. Many times in martial arts practice, regardless of the reasons that we practice, whether it be for sport, self-protection, health, or leaning toward a traditional, practical-based martial arts, we will all get challenged, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, or a combination of the 3. For most practitioners, they're learning techniques, forms, punches, kicks, joint locks. We are all usually involved in some aspect of this, but have you ever considered maybe why? I don't mean why like you're looking for self-protection or just for health, but why as to what you may be deeply looking for through the practice. Consider these 2 things as possibly being essential developments in yourself through your practice for both your personal life, your professional life, and your martial arts practice. One of the jewels that almost every one of us, whether we're 12 years old or 92 years old, we want to have are options. And options are born out of this first essential element to develop. It's called agility. Agility we're going to talk about in 2 forms. Physically, it's the ability to move quickly, change direction, and still be coordinated enough to throw an effective strike or kick. It's very important to us as a martial artist. A good exercise physiology description of agility is to possess quick reflexes, coordination, balance, speed, and have the correct response to the changing situation. And no one is excluded from this. Even if you're practicing martial arts and Tai Chi just for health, we may not all desire to be as agile as, say, a 29-year-old athlete, but we don't want to lose too much agility either. Ask anyone who has to use a cane, a walker, or afraid to walk down a flight of stairs if they'd like to have some of their agility returned. There are many different ways to developing physical agility. One of my favorites is the mirror drill. This can be a very mild and one-dimensional exercise, or it can get 3-dimensional and pretty darn intense. There's also the Illinois Agility Test, which is used both in schools for athletes and in law enforcement. It has a diagram of the course. I'll put a link in the show notes on the website for you because it has a diagram of the course and a little program that you can put the scores in, and it tells you how you did. Developing agility on these types of exercises and tests are extremely helpful, but they're not all-encompassing. Hand-eye, being able to grab and move, hands and feet working together are also extremely important. I also like to use reaction balls. Those are the little balls that have the little knots on the side and they bounce in all types of awkward directions. You can pick those up at any of your sporting goods facilities. That is the development of external physical agility, agility that you can see. But there is also internal agility. Let me share with you a couple of descriptions of internal agility. The Marine Corps Officers Training Program is designed to test an officer candidate's mental agility, his physical prowess, and moral strength. As a martial artist, especially as I'm aging, I like to have an extra helping of each one of those: mental agility, physical prowess, and moral strength. There's a website called Rule the Mind and has math and English mental agility tests. It's just 20 questions. They are scholastic mental agility exercises. Tom Hill, in his book, The Art of Self-Defense, states, quote, "Speed in self-defense comes from reaction time. It is the fast application of a technique, but it also requires mental agility for messages via your senses," end quote. In the book Convair Advanced Designs, Secret Projects from San Diego, by Mr. Robert Bradley, he discusses World War II pilots and the need not only for their physical reaction times, but their mental agility. And he writes, quote, "There is a myth that all laypersons intuitively believe that a test pilot must have exceedingly rapid reflexes. This is only half right. They must additionally have the mental agility to think precisely under the emotions of emergency flight conditions. A wise test pilot once said, 'A superior test pilot is one who uses his experience and planning to avoid situations that could be caused by his all-too-rapid reflex responses,'" end quote. In Mr. Bradley's words, the superior performance is by the one that uses his mental agility, based in experience and planning, instead of his physical reactions, in order to be successful. Being in an intense emotional moment and still able to think clearly is not something that just comes naturally. In fact, without practice, our emotions can supersede all clear thinking, and we end up in a worrisome stress or panic attack on something that hasn't even happened yet. Or we fall victim to the fatal poison. Perhaps one of the best ways to develop mental agility is to ask yourself questions. By asking yourself questions and then avoiding the traps, you can give yourself options. Now I'm going to reference this again very shortly. Mental agility to changing situations. Avoiding thinking traps is something that we really have to be careful of, and it can happen very quickly when we're stressed. Thinking traps can narrow our field of vision. Then we will often leave out very important information. Have you ever noticed any particular thinking traps or thinking patterns that you fall into? Let me read you another quote about mental agility. Mental agility is a flexibility of mind, a tendency to anticipate or adapt to uncertain or changing situations. Agility assists you in thinking through second and third order effects when current decisions or actions don't produce the desired results. It helps you to break from habitual thought patterns. It also helps you improvise when faced with conceptual impasses, as well as quickly apply multiple perspectives when considering new approaches or solutions. Mental agility is the ability to reason critically while keeping your mind open to multiple possibilities. You reason until you reach the most sensible solution. Critical thinking is a thought process that aims to find the truth in situations where direct observation is insufficient, impossible, or impractical. It allows you to think through and solve problems and is central to your decision making. Critical thinking is the key to understanding changing situations, finding causes, arriving at justifiable conclusions, making good judgments, and learning from experience. Critical thinking implies examining a problem in depth from multiple points of view and not settling for the first answer that comes to your mind. You need this ability because many of the choices you will face will require more than one solution. The first and most important step in finding an appropriate solution is to isolate the main problem. Sometimes determining the real problem presents you with a huge hurdle. At other times, you have to sort through distracting multiple problems just to get to the real issue. Your mental agility in quickly isolating a problem and identifying solutions allows you to take initiative and adjust to change. Agility and initiative do not appear magically, end quote. And that is from the U.S. Army Leadership Intelligence Manual. So for the research of this podcast, I found a lot of terms associated with thinking traps, and there are many that are very common. You can get the entire list of 8 thinking traps, the descriptions and questions that can pull you out of those traps, and exercise your mental agility, all for download on a PDF. In that list, I also share with you a real-time dialogue that happened between a student and I just 3 days ago before I published this. What was said and how he felt after we got through it. I will tell you where you can get that list shortly. But let's go through the 8. One of the traps is minimalization, where someone tends to discount the negative or positive impact of a situation. And just like in good yin-yang theory, its counterbalance is another trap, and that's called magnification. The cliché that you're making a mountain out of a molehill was born from this thinking trap. The third trap, mind reading, assuming that you know what another person is thinking, or expecting another person to know what you're thinking. Number 4, jumping to conclusions. This is where you are absolutely certain about a situation without any real data to support it. So there's the first 4. Minimization, magnification, mind reading, and jumping to conclusions. Number 5, it's all me. You believe that you are the sole cause of every problem you encounter. Number 6, it's all them. You believe that they are the sole cause of every problem you encounter. Number 7, it's all over, or overgeneralization. You believe that any criticism by a superior indicates that you will never advance or overcome. You are doomed. Number 8, it's all-encompassing. This is where you believe you can judge another person's character or your own worth, motivation, or ability on the basis of one single situation. This microscopic moment in time now represents eternity. So number 5 is that it's all me. Number 6 was that it's all them. Number 7 is all over. And number 8 is all-encompassing. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "It is not genius which reveals to me suddenly and secretly what I should do in circumstances unexpected by others. It is thought and meditation." Now, did you ever think that you'd hear Napoleon being supportive of meditation? When it comes to athletics, whether it's MMA, football, wrestling, or even tennis, the one thing you can develop is responding to a fluid situation where you don't always have all of the control. They have their agenda, the outcome that they want. The biggest difference between sporting events and self-defense, besides some major tactical and strategic differences, is that whatever your opponent does, you do expect it to happen within the confines of the rules and to be monitored by a referee. However, the skill of learning how to respond to a changing set of circumstances is invaluable. Some students here, for example, have to build up to it, where they do free form and training and exercises. A few are physical, but many of them have to actually work in their mind, using the next critical element to developing their training: their imagination. Exercising your imagination can help you see opportunities that were not there before, and it promotes your mental agility. James Whalen is a researcher, and he wrote in the Auditory Neuroscience Behavior Therapy Manual an article titled Cognitive Behavioral Strategies in Athletic Performance Enhancement. He wrote, quote, "Goal setting, imagery, or mental rehearsal, relaxation training, stress management, self-monitoring, self-instruction, cognitive restructuring, and modeling interventions dominate this literature. Our examination of these performance enhancement programs, both through a qualitative review and meta-analysis, supports the efficacy of cognitive behavioral interventions for the enhancement of sport performance." End quote. So we want to learn to exercise our imagination through relaxation, stress management, self-monitoring, self-instruction, and modeling, and then to put it into physical motion. As mentioned earlier, thinking traps must be avoided. Let's take an example of a student that prefers to strike rather than wrestle. You can almost guarantee that each time they see a technique, they're going to try to translate it immediately into a strike. I can show a jiu-jitsu practitioner the same technique, and they see it as a strangle or some sort of throw. However, when the imagination is encouraged, you can slow down and ask yourself those questions. Can I see this as a throw, as a joint lock, or perhaps some sort of strike? Is it a hand that gives or takes space? Is it a hand for long range, mid range, or short range? You can take a technique and let your mind get creative to explore how well you can make it work. But the key to breaking through there is learning how to exercise your imagination. Using your imagination can help pull you out of the ruts. If you were an actor playing a scene, how many ways could you portray it? Let's say you're standing in the room, there's a body on the floor, and your friend walks in. Are you now acting as A, the one who did it; B, the one who organized it; C, the one who innocently found it; D, the one who thought something was wrong but said nothing? With just imagining different possibilities, you can break out of the thinking traps and start pushing outward into new zones. I read some time ago a list of imagination exercises, and I'm going to share 7 of them with you here. You do not need to write these down. They will also be in the list of the 8 thinking traps to avoid. The first imagination exercise is to create a detail microscope. Visualize in detail, for example, being at the ocean. Every sense is activated. The smell of the sea, the sounds of the sea, the birds, your skin feeling the mist, the breeze and the warmth of the sun, the feel of your feet in the sand, every detail that you can imagine. It was said that the reason the movie Titanic was so riveting was the amount of effort to creating details of that ship's appearance in the film, down to the engraving on the silverware and the weave of the fabric on the drapery. The second exercise is to change your view. Now, comedians are great at this. The next time you see a dog or a cat, what do you look like to them? How would your voice sound in dog speak? Number 3, change the size. Make it look bigger, make it look smaller. For many of the students that I work with, exercising their imagination muscle is part of their regular workout because they have become to recognize that they fall into thinking traps. Now, I'm going to give you 4 more exercises that you can do to stimulate the imagination for you. And some of these I work with my 12-year-old son, and they do work great. The next exercise is to read more. Learning can stimulate creativity, but reading by itself without applying it to improve your imagination doesn't help. So you've got to actually sit down and be creative with what you read and what you're trying to learn. Expand your interests. Consider something you currently enjoy. What is one similar topic that may go along with it? Here's an example. One of my students is what is called a white hat hacker. He's paid to break into his company's website to expose security vulnerabilities to attack so that they can be fixed. This also led him to becoming interested in how to pick locks as well. The 6th exercise is develop your talents. Hone what you like to an expertise. I started out very rough in this podcasting, but I keep working and trying to develop myself, and I'm hoping to develop myself into a good storyteller as time goes by. And number 7, osmosis. Just simply start to hang out with creative people. So let's review these 7 exercises for building our imagination again. Create a detailed microscope. Change your view. Number 3, change the size of the situation. 4, read more. 5, expand your interests. 6, develop your talents to an expertise. And number 7, simple osmosis. So those are 2 important skills to develop in ourselves, our imagination and our mental agility. They apply physically, they apply to situations, and they give us an opportunity to consider much more. But there is one poison apple that we must always work to avoid: the poison of indecision. I am sure that I've mentioned this before, but if there is one poison to success, physically, mentally, or emotionally, it is hovering in indecision. Sometimes indecisiveness can feed procrastination, and that is one nasty cycle to get in, and it's a really hard one to get out of. Before we go into indecision, let me clarify a couple of things. I'm not saying rush into a decision or go full speed ahead all the time. The cliche, only fools rush in, is quite proven. But there is a balance between realizing that you have enough information to make a decision, and my rule of thumb on that is about 75%, as compared to waiting till you believe you have all the information. But if you're not sure, then continue to collect more information if you need to, because do remember that rushing in was one of the thinking traps. Mr. Greg Laurie, at his blog called The New Beginning, he wrote an article titled The Dangers of Indecision. His reference story is one of the oldest stories on indecision, the story on Pontius Pilate. Mr. Laurie wrote about Pontius Pilate by saying, quote, "He is a very indecisive man who allowed other people to make his decisions for him. Pilate grappled with the issue of what to do with Jesus. This decision about Jesus was a lose-lose situation as far as Pilate was concerned. If he released Jesus, he would incur the wrath of the Sanhedrin and would probably lose his position and perhaps his life. If he crucified Jesus, he would appease the people, but he would be doing the wrong thing. Pilate was a moral relativist whose only core belief was self-preservation. Pilate faced the opportunity of a lifetime, but all he could think about was how to get rid of Jesus and get out of the situation. He knew what was right. He knew Jesus was innocent. So the reason that Pontius Pilate was indecisive wasn't that he didn't have the information. It wasn't that he didn't know what the right thing to do was. It was trading quote, his soul for position, power, and prestige, end quote. And that caused the indecision. Many of us don't have to carry the weight of those kinds of decisions, but we can still get caught up in the trap between having more than enough data, knowing what the responsible or appropriate decision is, and then being weighed against something that we want. So generally, I will define indecision as being you have at least 75% of the information you need to make a responsible decision, and 2, you have enough experience and counsel to know what that decision should be. Something that I repeat often to myself, you are usually better off making a mistake of action with good intent than taking no action where it is warranted. And I'm going to tell you one more story about not being indecisive and a man that tested it. Andrew Carnegie is believed to be the world's first billionaire. He called a young reporter into his office and he asked him to devote 20 years to interviewing only the world's richest people in order to share the secret of wealth, success, and happiness with the rest of the world. When Mr. Carnegie asked this reporter the question, he secretly, under his desk, had a stopwatch that was clicking. He gave the reporter 60 seconds to answer yes or no. Mr. Carnegie knew that successful people make decisions quickly. And of course, that led to the time-tested book, Think and Grow Rich, that is still referenced and utilized to this day, and it was published in 1937. So though it may not sound necessarily pleasant, the only thing worse than making a bad decision sometime is being indecisive. And through time, I can assure you that I've found that to be true over and over again. If you'd like to get the list of the 8 thinking traps to avoid and the 7 exercises for the imagination, go to TibetChungFu.net/mental agility, and it should be in your show notes, and you can go right there and have it emailed right over to you. In closing, next week the newsletter should go out and it should have a list of the upcoming workshops, or you can go to TibetChungFu.net/calendar. And also, I would really appreciate if you'd go to TibetChungFu.net/help Steve and help us reach the $1,500 mark to getting this young man the wooden dummy so that he can go back to training his martial arts. Steve was injured while he was in Afghanistan fighting for his country, and all he wants to do is get back into his training. By either donating a few dollars or going to the webpage and sharing the message, maybe you have a family or friend who would be willing to donate. Thank you for everything you do. I really look forward to seeing you all out there in Tacoma. Remember that when you go out there to practice today, you go out there to practice Kung Fu to be a better person first and a better martial artist second. I'll be talking with you again real soon.